It was on a rainy evening when I met her, the kind of rain that smells like memories waiting to happen. I was late leaving work, trying to cover my head with my jacket, when she ran past me, laughing as she tried to catch her umbrella that had flipped inside out. She was soaked, hair stuck to her face, but her smile was brighter than the streetlights. I helped her catch the umbrella, and when our hands touched, something inside me changed. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just rain. But that moment felt like a beginning. Her name was Elena. She worked at a bookstore across from my office. She loved old novels and black coffee. She said she believed in love stories, but only the kind that hurt a little. We started seeing each other every day. Lunch breaks turned into long walks, and long walks turned into nights where we forgot the world existed. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She had this way of making silence feel warm, like you didn't have to say anything to be understood. She'd talk about dreams she didn't believe would come true. Opening her own cafe by the sea, living somewhere quiet, painting sunsets. I told her I'd be there when she did. She smiled and said, "Don't promise things you can't keep." I said, "I'm not like the others." She whispered, "I hope not." And for a while it was perfect. We shared everything, from cheap dinners to sleepless nights filled with laughter. She called me her safe place, and I believed her. I thought I finally found the person who would never leave. But slowly, something changed. She started pulling away, first with her words, then with her eyes. Calls became shorter. Messages went unanswered. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing. I'm just tired." But it wasn't the kind of tired that sleep could fix. It was the kind of tired that came from trying too hard to stay. One night, I went to surprise her at the bookstore. I brought her favorite coffee and a note that said, "I love you, no matter what." But when I got there, she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, helping her close the shop. He touched her shoulder gently, and she smiled. That same smile she once gave me. She saw me standing outside, frozen in the rain, holding 2 cups of coffee that had gone cold. Our eyes met, and in that silence, everything fell apart. She came outside, trembling. "It's not what you think," she said, but her voice cracked halfway through. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I saw it. The distance, the guilt, the goodbye already forming in her eyes. She said she needed time. I gave her weeks, then months. I waited, thinking love would bring her back. But it never did. The rain came again just like the night we met. Only this time she wasn't there. Just the sound of water hitting the pavement, and the echo of a promise that didn't last. The days after she left felt like someone had turned down the volume of my life. Everything looked the same, but nothing sounded the same. The laughter of people, the songs on the radio, even the sound of rain. All of it reminded me of her. I kept checking my phone, hoping for her name to appear. Every time it buzzed, my heart jumped. But it was never her. It was never Elena. The coffee shop near her bookstore still kept her favorite table by the window. I went there sometimes, pretending she'd walk in, smiling, saying, "Sorry, I'm late," but she never did. I started writing her letters, not to send them, but to speak the words I couldn't let go of. Letters that began with "I miss you" and ended with "Please come home." I thought time would heal me, but time just made her absence louder. I'd lie awake at night, remembering the sound of her laughter. She had this soft laugh, like a secret only I was supposed to hear. And now even that was gone. One evening, months later, I walked past the bookstore again. It was empty. The windows were covered with brown paper, and the sign that once said, "Open," was gone. For a moment, I stood there, staring at my reflection in the glass. The place where we first met was now just another closed door. I turned away and started walking. That's when I saw her across the street. She looked the same, maybe a little thinner, her hair tied back, a box of books in her hands. My heart raced. I wanted to run to her, but something stopped me. The man from before walked up behind her, took the box, and kissed her on the forehead. And in that 1 second, I knew she had moved on. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to erase her. But love doesn't disappear just because it hurts. stays like a scar you learn to live with. That night, I sat by the window, listening to the rain again. It hit the glass the same way it did the night we met. Only this time I didn't run after anyone. I just let it fall. That's when I realized something. Maybe love isn't always meant to last. Maybe some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to teach you what love feels like, before it breaks you. Elena taught me how to love softly, how to listen, how to give without expecting. And even though she left, those pieces of her stayed with me. A few weeks later, I took a trip to the sea, the place she used to dream about. I found a small cafe there, old and quiet just like she described. I sat by the window, watching the waves crash softly against the shore. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. Just thankful. Thankful that I got to love someone who once made the world feel magical. I took out my notebook and wrote one last letter. Dear Elena, I forgive you. I hope you're smiling somewhere, even if it's not with me. Thank you for being my almost forever. Then I folded the paper and let the wind take it. It flew toward the sea and disappeared into the horizon. Maybe that's how love ends. Not with closure, not with goodbye, but with the quiet understanding that some hearts meet only once, and that once is enough. After that day by the sea, something inside me began to shift. It wasn't sudden, not like a door slamming shut. It was quiet, like the slow fading of a song you used to play every night. For months, I had been living in the ghost of what used to be. Every street, every song, every dream still had her name written somewhere. But the wind that carried my letter away that evening also carried a little of my pain with it. I started waking up earlier, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. Just black, the way she liked it. But now it wasn't to remember her. It was to remember me. The rain still came often, and at first I used to close the curtains. But one morning I didn't. I let the rain pour, filling the air with that same scent from the night we met. Only this time it didn't make me sad. It made me grateful. That once in my life, I had known a love deep enough to miss. I found a new job in another city. Packed my things, the books she gave me, the photographs, the memories I couldn't throw away. And as I closed the door to my old apartment, I whispered, "Thank you, Elena, for everything." Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Some nights still hurt. Some mornings still felt empty. But slowly, the pain began to turn into peace. I started walking again, not the kind of walking you do to escape, but the kind where you notice the world. The color of the sky, the laughter of strangers, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery near my street. I even began writing again, not letters to her, but stories. Stories about love, loss, and learning how to breathe again. I wrote not because I wanted her back, but because I had something to say. One evening, I sat at a small cafe, just like the one she dreamed of owning. There was a woman sitting near the window, reading a book. She looked up and smiled at me. Not the kind of smile that shakes your world, but the kind that quietly says, "I see you." And for the first time in a long while, I smiled back, genuinely. No ghosts between us. No expectations. Just two souls sharing the same moment in time. That's when I realized, letting go isn't about forgetting someone. It's about remembering them without pain. Elena would always be a part of my story, but not my whole story. She was a chapter, beautiful, painful, unforgettable, but not the end. When I walked out of that cafe, the evening sky was painted in gold and blue, the same colors she loved. The wind brushed past me, soft and kind, like a whisper, and I swear, for a second, I felt her there, smiling, free, somewhere far away, and I knew she had found her peace too. So I whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, Elena. You don't belong to my pain anymore. You belong to my gratitude." The waves, the rain, the fire, everything that once reminded me of her, now reminded me of how far I had come. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. No dreams, no ache, just silence, the kind of silence that feels like healing. It's been 2 years since I last saw her. 2 years since I watched her walk away into a life that no longer had my name in it. And yet, some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear her voice. The human heart is strange that way. It remembers the echo long after the sound is gone. But I've learned something about pain. It softens. It doesn't vanish, but it stops screaming. It turns into a whisper that says, "You lived through it." I live near the coast now. My apartment is small, with white walls and a big window that looks out over the sea. Some evenings, the sky turns the same shade of gold she used to paint in her dreams. I still write, not for her anymore, but for myself. Stories about people who love and lose and heal. Stories that remind me that endings are not always sad. Sometimes, endings are just beginnings disguised as pain. There's a little cafe down the street. I go there most mornings, same corner seat, same quiet peace. The owner, a kind older woman, always greets me with the same line. "You again? You must really love silence." And I do, because silence is no longer my enemy. It's my friend now. It was a cold morning in March when I met Maya. She was sitting 2 tables away, a camera in her hands, trying to capture the sunlight hitting a cup of coffee. Her lens kept fogging up, and she laughed. That small, genuine laugh people make when they're not trying to impress anyone. Something about it felt familiar. Not like Elena, not the same fire, not the same electricity. No, this was different. This was gentle. I asked, "Photographer?" She shook her head. "No, just trying to remember things better." We talked for a few minutes that turned into an hour. She told me she'd lost someone too. Not to betrayal, but to time. And somehow, without realizing it, we started meeting every week. Same cafe, same corner, same unspoken comfort. Maya never asked me about my past, and I never asked about hers. We just existed, 2 people quietly rebuilding themselves, 1 cup of coffee at a time. She'd tell me about her love for the ocean, how she used to come there to clear her mind. So one evening we went to the beach together. The waves were soft, the sunset kind. She took her camera out and said, "Smile." I did, for the first time in a very long time, not because I was told to, but because I wanted to. That night, as we walked home, she said, "You know, sometimes the universe sends new people when you stop trying to fix the old pain." Her words stayed with me. Months passed. Maya became my closest friend, the quiet kind of friend who understands the spaces between words. One evening, I found a box buried in my closet. Inside were the letters I wrote to Elena, hundreds of them. I sat on the floor, reading through a few, my hands trembling between sadness and nostalgia. Then I realized something beautiful. None of those letters hurt anymore. They were no longer heavy. They were just memories. So I took them down to the shore, the same spot where I once let the wind carry my last letter away. This time, Maya was with me. She didn't ask questions. She just stood beside me as I fed the letters to the fire, page by page. The flames flickered against the waves, dancing like 2 old friends saying goodbye. When it was over, I felt lighter. Not because I'd erased the past, but because I'd learned to bless it. One night, Maya and I were walking home in the rain. Not a storm, just a soft drizzle, the kind that makes the streets shine. And suddenly, everything felt familiar again. The rain, the laughter, the warmth. But this time there was no fear, no ache, just peace. She slipped her hand into mine, quietly, naturally. No promises, no big words, just presence. That's how love came back. Not like fire, not like thunder, but like the first light of morning after a long night. Quiet, soft, and real. A year later, Maya opened a small art gallery by the sea. On one of the walls, she hung a photo of the ocean with a letter floating in it. When I asked about it, she smiled and said, "It's called The Goodbye That Set Me Free." I didn't ask whose story it was. I already knew. And sometimes, when the sun sets and the light fills the room, I think of Elena. Not with sadness, not with longing, but with gratitude. Because if she hadn't left, I might never have learned how to love again. Not someone else, but myself. Life is strange. It takes from you, breaks you, and then somehow gives you pieces you didn't know you needed. Elena was my heartbreak. Maya was my healing. But the real story was never about them. It was about me learning that love doesn't always stay, but it always teaches. And if you're lucky, after all the pain and silence, love finds you again, quietly, when you're finally ready to listen. Because some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with peace, and that's even better. One day, he receives a letter, written by Elena long before she left. In it, she confesses something he never knew, a truth that changes how he remembers everything. The story dives into forgiveness, regret, and the strange way closure arrives too late. Tone: emotional, nostalgic, truth revealed after time. Message: sometimes love fails, but honesty can still heal what's left behind. He visits their old city for work and finds the bookstore rebuilt under a new name. The memories rush back, and he learns that the man who was with her before has left too. It's not about revenge, but realization. Even broken people deserve compassion. Sometimes love doesn't last because it wasn't ready to. Years later, he walks in the same rain where they first met, only this time with Maya. The world feels familiar yet new. He shares the story of that rainy night with her, finally letting the past fully rest. It ends poetically, like life coming full circle. Tone: poetic, soft, peaceful closure. Message: when you truly heal, even old pain becomes beautiful memory. He and Maya open a little seaside cafe, the dream Elena once had. But it's not out of guilt. It's out of love and gratitude. Every visitor comes with their own story, and he becomes the quiet listener who helps others heal. Tone: hopeful, meaningful, calm, and heartwarming. Message: healing becomes complete when you use your pain to help others. Years later, he finds a letter he once wrote but never sent. He reads it aloud, not to Elena, but to Maya, a symbol that the cycle of love, loss, and healing is complete. The story ends with him watching the sunrise, whispering, "I loved, I lost, and I lived." True peace isn't forgetting. It's remembering without pain. It was a quiet morning when it arrived, a small, plain envelope with no return address. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The handwriting on it was soft, almost shy. But when I saw her name written on the corner, Elena, the world seemed to stop for a moment. My hands trembled. It had been years since I'd seen her name anywhere. For a second, I didn't know if I wanted to open it. I was afraid that after all this time, her words would pull me back into a place I had finally learned to leave. But curiosity, and something softer, maybe love, maybe longing, made me break the seal. Inside was a letter, slightly worn, the edges yellowed with time. The first line read, "If you're reading this, it means I was too much of a coward to say these words in person." I felt my throat tighten. I read on. "I don't know how to start or how to explain what I did to us. You deserve honesty even if it's too late. When we met, you made me believe in something I'd given up on, love that didn't hurt. For a while, I thought I could be the kind of person who stayed. But life had other plans. The truth is, I was sick." I froze. My eyes went back to that line. I was sick. The words blurred. I read them again and again. "When the doctors told me I didn't want you to see me fade. I didn't want you to turn your dreams into caretaking. You loved me too much to walk away, so I did it for you. I thought leaving would protect you. But every night, I broke a little more, wondering if you hated me." Tears started to fall, slow and silent. Every scene from our past, her sudden distance, the tiredness in her eyes, her shaking hands, it all made sense now. "The man you saw at the bookstore, he wasn't what you thought. He was my doctor's brother. He helped me close the shop that day because I couldn't stand long anymore. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid that once you saw me like that, you'd never smile again. I had spent years believing she betrayed me. Years building walls around something that was never broken, only misunderstood. And now, in one letter, the truth collapsed all those walls. If I'm gone by the time you read this, Please don't let the memory of me be your prison. Love again. Laugh again. You were my favorite chapter. Not because it lasted forever, but because it was real. The letter ended with a single line written in shaky handwriting. Some loves are too beautiful to last long, but they're beautiful enough to remember forever. I held that letter for a long time. The waves outside my window moved softly, as if the world itself was trying to comfort me. It was strange. The pain I once felt didn't come back. Instead, there was peace. A quiet, gentle peace that said, "She didn't leave me to hurt me. She left me to protect me." I took a deep breath and whispered her name. Not in anger, not in regret, but in gratitude. Thank you, Elena, for loving me in your own broken way. That night, I went down to the beach again. The same place I had burned the old letters. The same wind that once carried my pain away. I brought this last letter with me, her truth, her goodbye. The moonlight danced on the water as I held the page close to my heart, then let it go. The sea carried it gently, as if it knew it belonged somewhere beyond sorrow. And as it floated away, I realized something. Sometimes love doesn't need to last forever to be true. It just needs to be honest. That night, I slept deeply. Not because the story ended, but because I finally understood it. It had been almost 3 years since I found Elena's letter. Life had grown quieter since then. Not empty, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after a long storm, when you finally stop waiting for thunder. I'd moved to another town, started a small photography studio by the coast. Most days, I captured sunsets, wedding smiles, and tourists laughing. All those fleeting moments that people want to hold on to before time takes them away. But sometimes, in the middle of editing photos, I'd think of her. Not with pain anymore, just with that gentle ache of memory. The kind you carry not because it hurts, but because it mattered. Then one afternoon, a client called asking if I could shoot an event. A small reopening in the old city. A bookstore newly renovated under a different name. When I heard the address, my heart skipped a beat. It was that bookstore. Ours. For a moment, I considered saying no. But something in me, curiosity, maybe courage, told me I needed to see it again. To face the ghost that still lingered between those walls. The city hadn't changed much. Same crooked streets, same slow rhythm of life. But when I stood outside the bookstore, I barely recognized it. The old creaking wooden sign was gone, replaced with a simple one that read, "Paper and Light." Through the glass, I saw shelves lined with books, old and new, and the faint golden light spilling from inside. It was beautiful, and painful, and strange. I walked in slowly, my camera hanging from my shoulder. The scent of paper and dust greeted me, just like before. For a moment, I almost expected to hear her laugh from behind the counter. A woman greeted me, not Elena, of course. She was in her 50s, kind eyes, soft smile. "You must be the photographer," she said. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, forcing a smile. "This place, it's beautiful." She smiled gently. "It used to belong to a young woman named Elena. She ran it years ago before she passed. Her brother sold it to me last year." "You knew her?" I froze. Her brother? Elena had never mentioned a brother, or maybe she had, and I just never asked enough questions back then. I swallowed hard. "Yes, I knew her. A long time ago." The woman's eyes softened. "She used to come here every morning, even when she wasn't well. Said the books made her feel alive. I think she loved this place more than anything." I smiled faintly. She did. After the small event ended, I stayed behind for a while, pretending to pack my camera gear. When the lights dimmed and the last customer left, I walked to the corner of the shop where the old reading chair used to sit. It wasn't there anymore, but I could still see her, Elena, sitting cross-legged with a cup of coffee and that soft, distant smile. I sat on the floor quietly, leaning against a bookshelf, and whispered, "You kept your promise after all. The place is still full of light." The silence that followed felt like an answer. Not in words, but in warmth, the kind you feel deep in your chest when you know you're exactly where you need to be. As I stood up to leave, I noticed something tucked behind a row of old poetry books. A photo frame, dusty but intact. I pulled it out carefully. It was a picture of the bookstore years ago, and there, standing by the doorway, was her. Elena. Her smile, frozen in time, caught the light in the same gentle way I remembered. Underneath, in small handwriting, was a quote I'd once told her. "One day, even the rain will sound like music again." My chest tightened. She had written my words. I stood there for a long time, the photo in my hands, until I realized I was smiling. Really smiling. The pain that once defined me didn't hurt anymore. It had turned into something softer, gratitude, maybe. When I left the bookstore, the sky had turned golden, and the rain had just begun to fall, soft, harmless, familiar. I didn't rush for cover. I let it fall on me drop by drop, just like that day we met. And for the first time in years, the rain didn't remind me of loss. It reminded me of her laughter, of beginnings, of promises that never needed to be kept to be real. As I walked away from that street, I whispered into the wind, "Goodbye, Elena. You were right. The rain sounds like music again." The years passed quietly after that visit to the bookstore. Life didn't rush me anymore. I learned to take things slow, to sip my coffee without checking the time, to watch the sunset instead of chasing it. And somewhere in those unhurried days, I found peace. But peace has a strange way of sneaking up on you. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives one day, soft, unexpected, like rain on a quiet afternoon. That's how I met Maya. It wasn't love at first sight. It wasn't thunder or fireworks. It was calm, the kind of calm that feels like home. She came into my studio one morning to print some photos of her late father. Her voice was gentle, her smile shy. We talked about photography, about how some moments refuse to fade, no matter how much time passes. When she left that day, the studio felt different, brighter somehow. Weeks turned into months. Maya and I became friends, easy, unforced friends. She didn't ask too many questions about my past, and I didn't offer much. We just shared small things. Quiet laughter, morning walks, the comfort of presence. One evening, while editing photos, I showed her the picture I found at the old bookstore, the one of Elena standing by the door. I told her the story. Not everything, just enough. About how love had come and gone, and how sometimes goodbye doesn't mean the end. Maya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached over and placed her hand on mine. Her touch was warm, steady, reassuring. "She must have loved you deeply," Maya said softly. "And you loved her too. But maybe love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes, it just means teaching each other how to live." Her words settled in my heart like a seed finding soil. It was months later, on a rainy day in late spring, that everything came full circle. We were walking through the old part of the city, hand in hand, when the rain began to fall. Not a storm, just a soft drizzle, gentle and cool. The kind that made the streets shimmer under the light. People rushed for cover, umbrellas popping open like flowers. But I stopped. Maya turned to me, confused. "You okay?" I looked up at the sky, at the rain falling the same way it had all those years ago when I first met Elena. I could almost hear her laugh in the sound of it. Light, careless, alive. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I just haven't walked in the rain for a long time." Maya smiled. "Then let's walk." And we did. We walked without hurrying, without worrying about the cold. The rain soaked through our clothes, ran down our faces, but we didn't care. There was something healing about it, something pure. Every drop felt like a memory, the laughter, the heartbreak, the forgiveness. And in the middle of it all, I realized something. The rain didn't belong to Elena anymore. It belonged to life itself. We stopped by a quiet corner, the same one where the old bookstore once stood. The sign still said paper and light. Through the window, I could see the soft glow of lamps, and a young couple reading together, heads close, laughing at something only they understood. It made me smile. Maya leaned her head on my shoulder. "You miss her sometimes, don't you?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I do. But it doesn't hurt anymore. I think I just miss who I was when she loved me. Maya looked up at me and smiled. Maybe that version of you isn't gone. Maybe he just grew up. I chuckled softly. Maybe. We stood there in silence, the rain falling softly around us. And for the first time, I felt like Elena wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a chapter, a beautiful one that ended, but left its mark on every page that followed. As we turned to leave, I glanced at the sky one last time. The rain sparkled in the streetlight, and in it, I swore I could hear her voice. Faint but clear, like an echo from another life. See? I told you. The rain would sound like music again. I smiled, whispered, "You were right," and squeezed Maya's hand. Together we walked home. Two souls, both a little bruised, both a little healed, learning that love doesn't always have to begin again. Sometimes it just continues, in a gentler form. The sea has a strange way of teaching you things. It never stops moving, never stops returning, no matter how far the tide pulls it away. Maybe that's why I ended up here, because no matter how far life took me, somehow, it always brought me back to the water. Maya and I moved to the coast a year after that rainy day in the city. The place was small. An old fisherman's cottage with cracked white walls and a view that could silence your thoughts. Most people would have seen a ruin. We saw possibility. Maya had always wanted to run a small cafe. Something simple, cozy, the kind of place where strangers could sit quietly and forget about the world for a while. So we did it. We called it the Lighthouse Cafe. Every morning, the air smelled like salt and freshly baked bread. We painted the walls a soft cream color, hung fairy lights across the beams, and placed shelves of books by the windows. It wasn't fancy, but it had a soul. The kind of soul that comes from love. Not the loud kind, but the gentle one that stays. Sometimes, I'd stand behind the counter watching people. Couples laughing, old friends reminiscing, a quiet traveler writing in his journal. And I'd think, maybe this is what healing looks like. One evening, as the sun was setting, Maya found an old wooden box in the storage room. Inside were letters, menus, and recipes from the previous owners. And among them, a single folded piece of paper with handwriting that made my heart stop for a moment. It was Elena's. The top of the page read, "Dream Cafe by the Sea." It wasn't long, just a rough sketch of a seaside cafe she'd once described to me years ago, back when we'd sit on the rooftop talking about what we'd do one day. There were notes written in her familiar looping script. Big windows facing the ocean. Soft music. Books everywhere. A place where broken hearts can rest. I smiled. A long, quiet smile that reached somewhere deep inside me. Maya was standing beside me, reading over my shoulder. "Is this her?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah." She dreamed of this long before we ever did. Maya placed her hand over mine. "Then we'll keep her dream alive." And we did. From that day on, we added a small corner shelf near the window, a quiet space we called the Dream Shelf. People started leaving letters there. Love letters, confessions, apologies, goodbyes. We never read them, never touched them. We just let them stay. Sometimes, someone would walk in with tears in their eyes, sit down, write a letter, and leave without saying a word. And somehow, that silence said everything. It became a place for stories. Not perfect ones, real ones. The kind of stories that break you, heal you, and change you all at once. One afternoon, a young woman came into the cafe, maybe in her early 20s. She ordered tea and sat by the window for hours, staring at the ocean. When she finally left, I noticed she'd placed a letter on the dream shelf. Simply read, "For the one I lost too soon. Thank you for teaching me how to love, even if it was only for a moment." I watched the waves through the glass and smiled. Elena's dream had become something far bigger than either of us could have imagined. That night, after closing, I sat outside on the deck with Maya. The ocean shimmered silver under the moonlight. We didn't talk much, we didn't need to. The sound of the waves was enough. After a while, Maya turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about her? Not with sadness. Just think about her." I nodded. "All the time, but not the way I used to. She feels more like A story I once read. One that changed me, even after I closed the book. Maya smiled. Maybe that's what love is supposed to do. Change us, not keep us. I looked out at the endless stretch of water and whispered, yeah, maybe you're right. The sea breeze brushed against my face, soft, familiar, like a whisper from somewhere beyond time. And for a second, I could almost hear her voice, Elena's voice, carried gently on the wind. You did it. You built the dream. I smiled through the quiet ache in my chest. We built it, Elena, I whispered back. All of us. The waves kept rolling in, and the stars looked close enough to touch. Maya rested her head on my shoulder, and I thought, maybe this was what forever really looked like. Not holding on, but letting everything find its place. The morning began with sunlight spilling across the ocean, soft and golden, like it was painting over all the years that had passed. The cafe was still quiet, the chairs stacked, the smell of roasted coffee lingering in the air. Maya was asleep upstairs, her slow breathing blending with the rhythm of the waves. I stood alone behind the counter, looking at the shelf by the window, the dream shelf. There were dozens of letters now, some new, some worn and faded, some written by trembling hands, some by the bold strokes of healing hearts. Every one of them held a story, and somehow, each story felt like a small echo of my own. As I began to dust the shelves, a thin, forgotten envelope slipped from between two books and landed on the floor. I bent down to pick it up. It wasn't one of the visitor's letters. It was old, really old, the paper yellowed, the ink slightly smudged. My heart skipped when I saw my own handwriting. I sat down slowly, the world outside going silent. I didn't even remember writing it, but as I looked closer, the date told me everything. 7 years ago, a month after Elena had left. It was a letter I'd written but never sent. The top line reads simply, Dear Elena. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. The words inside felt like they came from another lifetime, from a version of me that was still raw, still bleeding, still trying to understand how something so beautiful could end. Dear Elena, I don't know what I'll do with this letter. Maybe I'll burn it, maybe I'll hide it, maybe I'll never send it. But I need to write it anyway, because silence is too heavy, and I can't breathe under it anymore. I don't hate you. I thought I did. I wanted to. But I can't hate someone whose laughter still echoes in the walls of my heart. I hope you're okay. I hope you're somewhere safe, smiling at something small, like the way rain hits the windows, or how the ocean smells before a storm. I miss you, but I'm trying to be okay without you. Some days I even manage to smile. But sometimes, when the wind carries your name, I still look up. I paused. It felt like reading a stranger's pain, familiar, yet distant. I could feel the ache in every word, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was like tracing an old scar. It's there, but it doesn't bleed. I continued. If life ever lets me love again, I'll try to do it better, softer, slower, with more gratitude. I'll tell her everything I never told you. I'll make sure she never has to guess if she matters. And if she ever asks who taught me how to love, I'll tell her your name, not as a wound, but as a beginning. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. There it was, the truth I had once buried. Not bitterness, not anger, just love, raw, unfinished, and eternal in its own quiet way. I folded the letter carefully, the paper soft from age, and walked outside. The morning sun was rising higher, turning the sea into gold. Waves broke gently on the shore like whispers. I stepped barefoot into the sand, the letter clutched in my hand. The tide was low, calm. Maya came out behind me, her hair still messy from sleep, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw the letter. Another one? She asked softly. I nodded. The last one. She didn't ask questions. She just took my hand, and together we walked toward the water. I knelt down and placed the letter on the surface of the sea. The paper soaked slowly, curling at the edges before drifting away with the tide. Goodbye, I whispered. Thank you for everything. For the love, the lessons, the pain, and the peace. The waves carried it out until it disappeared completely, until all that was left was the sound of the ocean and the sunlight on the water. Maya leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you feel lighter?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah, I think I finally do." We stood there for a long time watching the horizon. The world felt still, like even the sea had paused to listen. And as the sun rose fully above the water, I realized something. Elena's story wasn't about loss. It was about transformation, about how love, real love, doesn't end. Changes shape, finds new forms, new hearts, new homes. I had carried her memory for years, afraid that letting go meant forgetting. But standing there beside Maya, I finally understood. Letting go doesn't mean losing someone. It means giving them back to the world. Later that morning, I returned to the cafe. Customers started trickling in, travelers, locals, dreamers. The smell of coffee filled the air again, and the light through the windows looked softer somehow. A new letter sat quietly on the dream shelf. I didn't read it. I didn't need to, because every story in some way was connected. I poured myself a cup of coffee, stepped outside, and watched the waves. Somewhere in the distance, a seagull called, and for a moment, everything felt complete. I loved, I lost, and I lived. That was enough.